All right. Okay, Dawn, you're up.
Okay. First, I want to say Happy New Year, everybody. And I loved hearing everybody's wonderful news. That was so nice. It's really nice. Everybody's here and sharing such great things. Now on to Devon. First of all, Devon has like this amazing long career that I'm going to summarize, and it does not do justice to what she has been doing. Major Devon Messecar earned her commission as a second lieutenant through the ROTC at Michigan State University in May 2007, where she was, of course, a distinguished graduate. She began her career as an intelligence analyst, serving two distinct positions at Travis Air Force Base in California. Over her 14-year career in the United States Air Force, Major Messecar deployed 3 times to support contingency operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as security at Joint Task Force Guantanamo. In Korea, Major Messecar worked with Joint Staff, State Department, including the U.S. Embassy Seoul, and OSD policy in a major policy shift with the politics both in Korea and the U.S. In July 2021, Major Messecar transferred to the Space Force. She is now charged with standing up a space division and bolstering the 10-cap space portfolio. Devon Messecar was an active member of the Bedford Rotary Club from 2013 to 2017 when stationed in Massachusetts, and was even named Rotarian of the Year one of those years. Devon also served as the president of the Seoul Young Leaders Club, an offshoot of the Rotary Club of Seoul, Korea, from 2017 to 2018. Welcome, Major Devon Messecar.
Thanks for the intro. It's honestly it's so nice to see everybody's faces. I've missed you guys so much, and I talk often about my time in Massachusetts and at the Bedford Rotary, and about all of you actually. And it was actually a perfect opportunity for me to work with the Seoul Young Leaders in Korea, which was a bunch of 30-something-year-olds trying to figure out Rotary. And most of us were a version of either expats or South Korean coming together for the English-speaking Rotary Club in Seoul. But it was a cool thing, and it's cool to have family, a Rotary family almost everywhere I go. And that was probably the best thing that I started when I was in Massachusetts, and it kept me going for a lot of the difficult transitions of living in a foreign country, having that Rotary family with me. I figured today I would talk a little bit about what I've done since I left Massachusetts and what it's like for me in the Space Force, which I've had like a weird career. So I'm a big anomaly weirdo, I guess. When it comes to like typical military careers, I have not had one. And then I would love to open it up to some questions, because I figure people probably have a lot of questions about the Space Force, maybe. So a couple of things. I'm actually working at an organization called Tactical Exploitation of National Capabilities. It's called 10-cap for short. And the national capabilities, if you think of like what the NRO does or NSA does, we were actually developed during the 70s when the NRO was still in the black, meaning that nobody really knew it existed. So they needed somebody, an organization that was kind of like a front man for the NRO, so that they could leverage some of those unique capabilities with NRO assets and get them down to the tactical warfighter. So think somebody on the ground doing special operations in some country. And that has progressed. It was actually mandated for the Air Force to set up a 10-cap back in '77, but it's changed a lot since then. And we've done a lot of really interesting things when it comes to space, and changing it from the concept of big N national agencies like NRO, CIA, DIA, NSA, name an acronym. It's probably somebody we've worked with. It's changed a little in that we've also done a lot of stuff with GPS. So GPS is not necessarily a big and national capability that works under something called Title 50. The military operates under Title 10. And so we usually try to bridge that gap between Title 10 and Title 50, but we've actually done things that improved accuracy of GPS capabilities for our air to ground weapon systems. And that would be like little n national, maybe. Oh, yeah, I will. Actually, absolutely. I'll shoot you a note afterward, Victor. So anyway, so it's been really interesting, but I ended up in Air Force 10 Cap because I did a stint down in Alabama. So most of you know that my husband and I lived in a camper for the last year in Alabama, which was awesome. We were at the campground on the base, and we called it affectionately Fam Camp. And so we have our Fam Camp family, and we still keep in touch with a lot of them. And it was great to have during COVID because we mostly hung out outside. But the program itself, I was actually in school, so I earned my second master's, and we did prototyping. So instead of going down and studying a bunch of books on dead people who wrote a lot of stuff about history and technology and techniques, we actually studied current technology and innovation, found a company, and actually did prototyping development. So there's about 14 of us that were in that class, and we ranged from majors up through lieutenant colonels, and one guy got promoted to 06 while we were there, and we paired off. And so I ended up working with a brilliant engineer who works at the Network Warfare Squadron now. And him and I did a project called Dagobah. And so if you're chuckling about Dagobah, it's because the Air Force tends to have an affinity to name things after anything related to Star Wars. And, yeah, I know. And so Dagobah, we made it an acronym, of course, because that's what you do in the military. Everything's an acronym. Is actually a planet devoid of technology. And so that was our humorous nod to some of the lack of technology that we have in the military, kind of poking fun at ourselves a little bit. But we did a data integration project. And so we looked at how to federate data better, because we have all these different organizations within one of the services, but also between services, we have these stovepipes. And so it's really hard for us to crosstalk information. Most of the time you think of like Google or some of these other companies, they have their information housed within. And so for them to share it is a little bit easier. But the way that we've operated on some of our older systems, it makes it more difficult for us to share some of that information. And so that was one of the things that we had worked on. So we worked with a smaller business company that was just getting started, and we made some headway, worked with the chief data office and the Pentagon, and spent a lot of time working with the chief architect, who was working like the battle management family of systems, how we get all of our systems across the DoD to talk to each other. And it was a very rewarding experience, but that prototyping effort kind of led me to 10 Cap, where we do rapid acquisition and prototyping. And so that's what I'm working on right now. For the Space Force, we actually talked to the Vice Chief of Space Operations, General D.T. Thompson, in the beginning of December, which was a really exciting thing for me. I will say that I transferred to the Space Force on July 30th, which is my birthday. So it was a big deal for me. I would say it's probably more exciting for me than actually getting promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, but that's just a personal thing. I think I had already a pretty eclectic career across the Air Force, that making this next leap to try something new and creative and innovative and unknown was pretty exciting, actually. And I'm a little bit of a science fiction nerd, or becoming one, I guess. And so this was like perfect for me to kind of explore a new area that's really changing and developing. For example, as the Space Force is standing up, they're talking about things like orbital warfare, which is in in unclassified areas and things like that, those are terms that we never brought up in the past. And so I think it's forcing people to look at it in a different way. And I just since July, I've gotten to meet so many interesting people. My two fangirl moments over the last couple of months, I actually got to meet Emily from Emily's Wonder Lab on Netflix. And I don't know if anybody maybe your grandkids or your kids had watched it, but Emily, she did, science experiments while pregnant on Netflix, and it was kind of like a really big deal. And she's very heavily involved in this space community. And we had a Space Force Association event, and I got to meet her, which was awesome. And total fangirl moment. And my other fangirl moment was because I was at the NDIA symposium here, and it was my very first space symposium, and I was like, okay, I need to absorb all these space things because I don't know anything about space. I am learning every step of the way. And so I went to the symposium, and the COO for SpaceX shows up, and that's Gwen Shotwell. And I was so excited. And if you've never heard her talk, she's funny and smart and just like a pleasure to listen to. And it was my second fangirl moment, meeting the COO of SpaceX, who has really been there for almost 20 years from the beginning, from all the failures and pushing through to make things work. And I think just the resiliency of being in an organization that is going through those hiccups and, from a prototyping perspective, that is so interesting to be able to overcome that, and then to be as successful as SpaceX has been, and how they've really changed the space community and space environment and what we think we can do with some of our space capabilities. I think those were the two kind of standout moments for me. At that same symposium is where I incidentally met General Thompson, because me being the shy one, I walked up to him and I said, hey, what about a space for 10 cap, like space stuff for 10 cap? And he's like, oh, I've never thought about that. Sure you have. And so we talked for a few minutes. I mean, like 3 tops, but it was cool. I mean, he's a 4-star general who was willing to give some rando major the time of day, and I was totally on board with that. And then he invited us to come out and talk about what we thought would be the evolution of doing tactical exploitation of national capabilities for space. And so that's what I've been developing over the last month, is how that's going to work and what that could look like. What are the right type of people to bring into the organization? What are the right type of projects we can work? How does funding work? all of those, nitnoid things that go into setting up an organization or an element within an organization. And so I'm only lucky enough. It's myself and one other Space Force 13S. She does space operations. She's an operator for some of the space capabilities. She's deployed right now, but has been offering a lot of her guidance and insight because she has so much more space experience than I do. But we've been making some really great headway over the last month, and I think that's kind of the exciting part, is being able to start some prototyping development efforts and a new organization in the first 6 months that I've been on the ground in Colorado. That was really kind of the highlight of the last year. That and a whole lot of bonfires in Alabama, because when you're at a campground, that's what you do. But I would love to talk a little bit more about the Space Force, but I really want to open it up for questions so I can kind of target what I talk about.
Question or comment?
I have a question. Devon, is the Space Force a separate branch of the military?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. So you know how the Navy is the Department of the Navy, and housed under that is the Navy and the Marine Corps?
Uh-huh.
The Air Force is the Department of the Air Force, and we are a separate service from the Air Force. So housed under the Department of the Air Force is the Air Force and the Space Force.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So it is a separate service. It's a separate branch.
Okay. Gotcha.
My
Well-
verbalization of that, Devon, would be to say that way back in 1947 is when the Security Act shred out the Air Force from the Army. It used to be the Army Air Corps, and the United States Air Force stood up as a separate branch. And I would view this one that shred out the Space Force from the Air Force is of equal importance, perhaps even momentous important going forward.
And that's actually a great point, because we've become so much more reliant on some of our space capabilities.
Yeah.
Just having a regular Air Force representative giving guidance on operations and strategic capabilities
Yes.
is just not enough. You really need somebody
Right.
with that space
Right.
acumen, that space background, giving that
Right.
sort of
Right.
guidance.
And I would also like to compliment your presence. You described one of your speakers in one of your moments as a person who was both funny and smart. And I would say that you are both funny and smart and brilliant, and you've got a tremendous grasp of all that's going on. And I know what it's like to be excited, because early on in my life, one of my goals was to be in the astronaut corps, and I never made it. But at least you're on your track to make your goals, and I bid you Godspeed and success.
Thank you, Jim. That's so nice of you.
Okay, I have a question. Devin.
Yes.
Try not to laugh too hard at my question,
No.
okay?
Oh,
So
okay.
I always wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, but math and I do not compute. So there goes, being an astronaut or anything to do with astronomy, because I don't know, the numbers and I do not compute. But my fangirl moment, and this is where you're gonna think I'm weird, I really listen to and am interested, and I really look deep down into that ancient alien theory.
Oh,
And so I know there's a show and everybody goes, oh my God, you're such a weirdo because you watch that show. But you know what? That's my fangirl moment. If I can meet anybody on that show, I'd be all excited.
Stargate? Are you talking about Stargate?
No, Ancient Aliens on History
it is
Channel.
called Ancient. Well, I will watch it, because I have to find out what you're talking about. That sounds very exciting.
So this is where it's a lot of ancient alien theory of where things come from space that have unexplained things on this planet. And Space Force to me, and I was in the Navy, so I would have loved to have joined the Space Force if I could have, if it was around in my day. But I feel like the Space Force is a vast, open, uncharted territory at the moment. So I'm wondering, as they're, the things that you guys are working on, do you guys, does the Space Force consider all of those kind of space things that have happened over the years and unexplained things that they try to figure out and all that kind of stuff?
Well, let me put it this way. I will say, I think that things are changing rapidly in the Space Force. One of the things that, when I talk about tactical exploitation of national capabilities in space, people oftentimes think I'm talking about space supporting the ground. And that is typically, when you think about GPS, right? People on the ground using GPS. When people think about space, oftentimes that is the arena that they're looking at. And so we've tried to divvy it out into different categories, where you're looking at not just space for terrestrial, but space for space, how the ground capabilities support some of our space assets, and then outside. So you're talking cislunar, in the moon area, beyond what space as we know it, which is, I think, a little bit of what you're getting at. But I do think it's a cultural and a little bit of a mind shift. What's great is that we've seen so many things change with technology that we thought were impossible in the last 5 years, in large part due to some of these commercial companies that have just, like a bull, charged forward regardless of what other people are saying. And I think the Space Force is starting to jump on board with that, meaning that they're looking at more opportunities beyond just space for terrestrial, space to support people on the ground.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Devin, can I ask a question?
Of course, Val.
I got up early on Christmas morning to watch the launch of the James Webb telescope.
So
And
cool.
what impressed me watching that whole thing was it wasn't just NASA doing its work with all our US resources. It was the whole world. And
Oh,
here,
yeah.
here countries joining together to make this telescope go up in the sky. And not only that, it didn't just end up orbiting the Earth, it's going on to orbit those two extra special places. You know, the space section that has its own orbit between the Earth and the sun, and the other gravitational balance on the other side of the Earth. I mean, that is really cool that you can actually orbit in space, but around a mathematical point. And I think it's exciting. And I think what you're getting into is just super exciting.
I took my first space, they called it Space 100. And because I'm, new to the Space Force as an almost lieutenant colonel, I was in class with a bunch of lieutenants and captains, which was kind of funny, but awesome because they're brilliant and really excited to learn as much as I am. So I enjoy it. But what I thought was interesting is, we learned a lot about orbital mechanics, and I knew nothing about that kind of stuff. And so this is like feeding, I feel like I missed the boat on going to school for like engineering or something like this. And this is like feeding this like void that I had in my life about absorbing all this like geeky science stuff that I missed out on as a kid.
Well, I'm thrilled. Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Thanks. Does anybody else? Pete, you came on just for me, huh? So do you have any questions? Did he jump off? Where'd he go? Oh, I missed Pete. All right.
Devin, I'm in the same boat. I jumped on because Christine told me you were here today.
Yeah.
And it's great to see your smile again.
Yes.
The question I had, how is there any tie between you and NASA, between the Space Force and NASA?
So, that's interesting. We're actually trying to build our relationship with NASA because we think we can leverage a lot of NASA's work for some of our experimentation that we're trying to do for the Space Force, and in large part vice versa. I think that the whole of government, the U.S. government and the world is still trying to figure out what that balance is going to be. And we're trying to leverage them, like I said, for experimentation. And I know, they're doing a lot of work with SpaceX, what I think is interesting from a more personnel administrative side is that the Air Force and the Space Force are actually sending people to work in commercial companies and to support NASA in different capacities from like a more educational. So it's almost like an internship while you're still working for the US government. And so we have a couple of people, they call it education with industry, EWI for short. And so some of these EWI representatives are captains and majors who are actually going to work for SpaceX for a period of time. But we are still also sending up applications for astronauts to compete alongside, regular people for those positions with NASA. So there's a lot of synergy, and I'm still finding some of those relationships that I haven't been exposed to yet. But I think it runs deeper than even I have been exposed to so far.
Awesome. Well, I wish you all the best.
Thanks. Hi, Pete. Sorry.
I have, yeah, we have contractors in the house. It's kind of crazy. I have a comment and a pointer for you,
Yeah.
So we went to the Air and Space Museum with my son, Drew, who totally geeked out at the installation that's out at Dulles, right? If you haven't been out, it's
huge.
amazing.
It's cool. Yeah.
It's very cool. And so it kind of rekindled. I said, oh, you remember, Drew, when we did all the Estes rockets, and yeah, we got all nostalgic. And so that resulted in a Christmas present that if you want to learn about space, this is.
Oh my God.
So
Is it picking up or is that you?
well, that's me. It's the Estes kit for Saturn V. It was the mother of all Estes rockets. And it was always too intimidating to build when I was younger, but I got the kit from Drew and the pressure's on to do it.
I have lots of confidence.
Great way to learn how to build rockets.
I know. I'm dying to get back. So we got up to Huntsville, but COVID was going on, so we didn't have as many opportunities. But I would like to get back to Huntsville, and they have like a space camp for adults.
Wow.
I'm really interested in that. I feel, joining a Space Force, I just feel like a kid again, which I guess is good if you're going to do it for a little while. So I'm enjoying myself so far.
Excellent.
Devon, I will tell you, I looked into the space camp for adults because my niece went, and she had a blast and told me that they do it for adults, and I never got to go as a kid. So I will gladly go with you anytime you want to go.
It's a date, Tracy. I like that.
I had another question, actually. So,
Sure.
Does the Space Force recruit specifically for the Space Force, like you would go into the Navy or the Army, or is there different physical requirements for the Space Force than the other branches?
So the first part of your question, yes, they are now recruiting people as a direct commission into the Space Force, either coming out of school or whatever. But they are still leveraging like the ROTC programs or the Air Force Academy for some of those commissionings. But I think even in officer training school in Alabama, there, you have your options. You can say, I want to go Air Force or Space Force. Eventually, I think that'll become more selective. But right now it's based on what are your interests, right? So if you want to be a fighter pilot, we probably aren't going to tell you have to go Space Force. It's going to be dependent. But those are some of the administrative things that I think the Space Force is still trying to figure out. As far as different physical requirements, I really don't know. I haven't seen any. I'm about to take my physical fitness test, but it's really the same as the Air Force. I'm not sure if there's any other questions, but I do want to say, oh, go ahead.
I do. I don't have a question personally, but I know my husband probably has a dozen, okay? And he really wanted to be here today, Devon. Not only just to hear you,
call me,
but to see you.
Call me anytime.
I want him to view the video, okay, and then maybe give you a call or an email. I don't have your phone number, but I know I can get your email, and he could be in touch with you because he's working on similar kind of projects that don't involve space too much, and he'd love to just touch base with you.
I'll send you my number and you guys can call me anytime.
Oh, great, Devon. It's been such a pleasure. I really miss our fun times together.
I know. Debbie
had
said a happy dance, and I listened to the happy song recently, and I just imagined us like dancing down the street in Bedford, and I got a little emotional. I missed you guys. It's it doesn't feel like it's been that long. Like I don't know, you're my family. I feel like I could pick up where we left up.
Yeah. Great seeing you. Thank you.
So Devon, yeah, you saw my email, my chat message. So I do have a really good contact at Army 10 Cap. She's been supporting a lot of my work. And she's great at reaching out to Air Force 10 Cap. So she and also working the commercial space section.
Oh, that's perfect. Because a lot of the Army are coming over to the Space Force too, because they have a whole, I forget what their MOS is, but they have a whole like dedicated section of people that are focused on space, and we're really excited to start working with them too. And this is all very new, so this is a perfect time to talk to lots and make new friends, lots of new
Yeah,
people.
yeah. Hey, so I don't know if this question came up earlier, but see, each of the armed forces has their own college, right?
So yeah, I think does the Marines, yeah, the Marines have their own too. So it looks like the Space Force is going to set up their own. I've seen a couple of questions anecdotally come through about, you know, what people liked about the schools that they've been to and what people didn't like. So I'm hoping that they take those to heart and do something extraordinary and a little bit different than what we've seen in the past.
They still call that in the professional military education arena as distinct from the academies. Is that what you're talking about, Victor?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I went to something called like Squadron Officer School, Air Command and Staff College, and then there's Air War College. And that goes from, you know, like captains, majors, and then colonels. And so my next objective would be Air War College.
That's in the PME arena.
Yes, professional military education, PME, correct.
Right.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys, for the time. And I'll shoot a note out to Dawn with my phone number and my email at work. And oh, thanks for the Ancient Aliens. I'll have to check out the History Channel. But you know, you guys are my family. You can always email or call me. Please don't feel like you have to do it formally at all. Anytime, truly.
Well, we miss you, Devon.
We miss you.
I miss you guys.
Yeah, you're
Love
welcome
you.
to join us any Tuesday.
Thank you so much, Devon. That was really, really fascinating. And as Ralph said, you're welcome anytime. Same link. So just join us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.